So the next discussion today is about leadership evolution. As we all know, leadership has become more collaborative and people-oriented. Today's world is shaped by technological and commercial innovations and disruptions. With change being a constant for all business domains, good leadership has evolved to become more flexible and highly adaptable. There has been a marked shift towards a more collaborative style of leadership. Employee input is often viewed as integral to decision-making processes, and employee engagement is an important principle of human resource management. The rise of remote working options, especially in present circumstances, has also shaped leadership as we know it. As the pace of technological and business changes can only be expected to increase in the future, the idea of effective leadership will also continue to evolve. In this panel discussion, we try to understand how leaders can adapt themselves to the changing scenario and also prepare themselves effectively. Welcoming our chairperson, Mr. Bhaskar Verma, Regional Head, Karnataka, NASSCOM. Sir, requesting you to please take your seat. Let's hear that for Mr. Bhaskar Verma, please. He is Regional Head of Karnataka NASSCOM. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. I'd like to invite our panelists, Suman K. Das, Managing Director, Lilly Services. Ravi Kumar, Senior Vice President, Projects and Application Services at NTT Data Services. Thirukkumaran Nagarajan, Vice President, Head of HR for India, South Asia at IBM India. So this is the esteemed panel we have with us. With this, we hand it over to Mr. Bhaskar.
Thank you. Namaskara and very good morning, very good afternoon, very good evening, people joining virtually. We are connected all across the world, people are joining virtually. Actually in this discussion, they have called me moderator, but I want to become your voice as a moderator and ask questions from my panelists about leadership evolution. While I was going through the discussion, what we are going to talk about, I was just Googling a little bit, which we are used to. As per Winston Churchill, he was talking about leadership evolution in terms of a leader should be having a very clear purpose, should have impact and empathy. But the third line when I read, I completely got stuck there. And it talks about leadership is hard and a lonely place. And I believe this is the evolution, and I hope you all agree, it's not a hard and a lonely place. You need to be among the people. So with that, I start with Thiru, to start with you. Very quickly, as I starter, as per you, what is the definition of a leader? And if you can share your any current events or your experience.
Thank you, Bhaskar, for having me. In today's context, the way I'd like to see leadership, and I'd like to quote, many of you would have heard of Simon Sinek. He's actually a good motivational speaker and quite a good person to get, leadership coaching on. Now, he actually says leadership is not about taking charge, but it is about taking care of those in your charge. I thought that was very relevant for today's world. And today, as you all will relate, it is no more about the hierarchical leadership where the leader on the top knows all the answers, provides direction every day of how things should work. No one works for one person in any company today. It is a completely different organization structure in the context of your organization, the business and the industry you're in. It is no more the top-down leadership. We see leaders in every aspect of a topic today. And A leader could be emerging from your newest employee. So in my view, the role of the leader is to identify the next generation of leaders, the Sachin Tendulkars, the Mithali Rajas that are lost across your organization, and bring them up because they are the best in the business or they are the best in a specific area of work. That's what a leader today should be doing. And the more the senior leadership in organizations are able to relate to that, because it's a distributed, agile structure that we all work in, which is remote. People don't even see each other these days. It is really important to identify leaders in various domains and make them the leaders, and you make sure that they get all the help and support. To me, that is the next evolution of leadership from what we've seen over the last few years to come.
Fantastic point, fantastic point. And my takeaway from your conversation, Thiru, is leaders' role are now becoming to nurture leaders or making new leaders, right? Suman, with that, your thoughts, please.
Well, I guess, after 25 years of being a leader, I don't think I've still figured it out. And I don't think it's very easy to define leadership. I can say one thing, leadership is really situational. You have to manage across generations. It cannot be one size fits the boot, I guess. When I reflect back to my journey, as Thiru said, what really comes across is that if you ask anybody what makes you remember a leader, they'll tell you that a leader who cares, right? And I think that came out very well in what we suffered during the pandemic. The other thing, which is an example which I learned from my personal experience, is how a leader behaves in a crisis is what matters. When the going is good, anybody can become a good leader, right? Like when the stock market is bullish and going up every day, you can be a great investor. So I was put in a charge of a restructuring in a foreign country. It was my first stint as a leader. And I thought my job was simply go there, and it was a group of about 100 people, and about 30 or 40 were getting retrenched. And it was just to go and execute. And I was supposed to be there for 3-4 years. So I was talking to a mentor of mine, and he said, you know what, you're going into this, to do this, and you're going into a situation in a foreign country, you don't know the local language. How should you approach it? So to cut the long story short, what I did during that time actually defined my whole stint there. I basically went in after discussing with him with 4 questions. Obviously, the restructuring we were doing, there was a part of the group that was very excited. So the first question was, what has you excited? The second one was more to people who were getting retrenched, what were you surprised to learn? Because for them it was like a ton of bricks when it fell on them. The third one was, what do you expect to go from here? Meaning that, are you expecting any more surprises next week? What happened with these 3 or 4 questions was, it helped me get the opening and the trust of that group that, okay, this person is not coming with a hatchet and is going to implement as it is. So the mirror I showed at that time, and to be honest, it was not by design. It was just because I went through and I realized that maybe had it been my comfort zone, let's say India, I might have been different. But it taught me a lot that you really need to think through every situation when you're approaching this kind of a thing, because at the end of the day, you cannot escape the human emotions, whether it's leadership or anything else. So that's how I would summarize it.
Thanks, Suman. And I think one of my key takeaway from your conversation is the trust. I picked it up from there. So over to you, Ravi.
All right. Hello, everyone. I think they're all great points. I'm just thinking, what should I tell you? So one thing, in addition to clarity of purpose for a leader, the most important thing that I feel, is about influence. If there is a single word that I can think of for being a leader, is influence. Right? It's not a manager. People always get confused between management and leadership, right? Management is getting things done, but most importantly, as a leader, how do you influence the people to to walk towards a common purpose? And what kind of a clarity can you provide to your team? It's very, very important. And I just want to pick on one point Suman just alluded to, is the crisis that we all went through, COVID-19. For all the struggle that all of us went through in an unprecedented situation, I don't think any of us in this world ever experienced that kind of a situation. But the good thing that came out of that was it threw up a lot of good leaders. Leaders at all levels, right? Take a look at all the especially during the wave 2, people were struggling to get hospital beds and oxygen and all of that. People threw up their hand and they said, no, I want to just help. At all levels, right? I still remember, a couple of kids, in my area. They were school kids, right? Nobody told them anything. They just formed their own group. They started linking the patients with the hospitals, calling up the hospital to see if there is a hospital bed available. Those are the leaders of the future. Now, these are the traits that need to be nurtured. These are the traits, that will ultimately make them great leaders. Doesn't matter what kind of a field the person would ultimately get into, right? That's the way I look at it. And, we've had huge success in identifying and picking those people, from a vast majority of people to become leaders in that. So that's my take.
Sure. And you got the last chance, so I want to be fair with you. So I will start with you for the next question. And very interestingly, we all talk about generation gap and things like that. I know, Ravi, you have written a book on thriving hacks on millennials and Gen Z. It's a very interesting conversation in the boardroom, also in the go for any meeting room. There's a generation gap. These guys are not understanding what we are trying to say, and these guys from the Gen Z, they are not able to pick what we are trying to tell them. So when you see these two different generations, and during our conversation also we have talked about generation is changing very fast, maybe within 2 years. So how you see all those positives and being very inclusive and coming together, because they have a different mindset. Maybe we are with a gray hair, we have a different mindset, but how we can come together and bring that completely collaborative environment.
All right. A very good point, Bhaskar. Thank you. Thanks for mentioning my book. So, before I come to the book, this generation gap, I think all of us, especially who have got more than one kid, can relate to it, I would assume. Right? Even the kids, that are 1 year apart, they behave very differently. Right? And that is a generation gap. If you want to look at, you don't need to go anywhere else. Just look at your own neighborhood, your own families. You see the generation gap. How do you deal with them? The leadership is all about, identifying those specific aspects of the gaps of different generations, and how do you relate to them. For example, several years ago, I was in London meeting a client. And, we were just a cup of coffee, we were talking, very interesting conversation. He said, Ravi, have you noticed that this generation is a lot more purposeful than our generation? Yes, I'll agree. They are so, so clear that, they don't want to be like, 9-to-5 jobber. They want, their life to mean a lot more, right? And as a leader, as an organization, how do you cater to that? Right, especially if you really look at all our organizations, one thing I have noticed is when it comes to employee engagement, when it comes to finding out what are people really, what can they really relate to, is some of them are they relate to what is called a social justice, right, or it could be anything that is related to society. They don't want just to be stuck in a job, right? If your engagement programs are, created around that aspect, I think, you're going to find a lot more successful. You can connect with people, right? Connecting with the younger generation, especially, Gen Z, is not through brute force. It can never work. It will never work. It's always through how do you, speak in their lingo. You look at Gen Zs, they're, right, they're the digitally native people. They were born with the technology, right? They don't understand, wait for 1 year, 2 years. No, they want instant gratification. They want things to move faster. How do you do that? Right? That's where my book, that is one of the things, that I had in mind when I wrote the book, was how do you create, all of us can teach our kids and our people a lot, but how do you teach them without, being, preachy? One thing that, the younger generation would hate is preaching. They don't like it, right? How do you make it, how do you get to their level of thinking and feed them bite-sized information, practical ideas to make their life better? That's what my book was about, and that's why I felt, when you initially told me about millennials and Gen Z, I said, man, this is a perfect opportunity for us to, see how do we relate to people. This is the leadership. Leadership is all about connecting with people, influencing them in a way that other people can understand, right? All of us know what needs to be done, right? The question is how to get it done. That is leadership.
Thank
I
you.
hope now I was able to answer that question.
Thank you, very insightful. And I will move on to Thiru. You are managing a large workforce from IBM standpoint. How you are seeing that experience, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I do have to say the vast majority of our workforce is Gen Z. The leaders are from like 2 generations above. The challenge is to bridge the gap. And as Ravi mentioned, I'm going to say the workforce of today is highly competitive. I'd like to say they are individuals first. They like their space. Only then is the broader teams. They like speed. They are self-taught. They are into the experience of work versus a career. If you talk to somebody in your team saying, hey, what do you want to be like 10, 20 years from now, 15 years from now? They don't care, nor do they know. So I think it's at the moment. I'd like to also say, if you run a survey, which one do you pick with this generation? Would you pick a job that's highly paying but it's boring work? Or would you pick a job which is not so well paying but highly interesting work? What kind of response would you get? Not saying money is not important. They like it, they'll take it too, but along with it, they'll absolutely they crave for flexibility. They do not like hierarchy. They actually appreciate meaningful work, as Ravi mentioned too. So it's a different workforce that we're dealing with today. Loyalty is only as good as how you can keep their interest and their engagement going. The moment they feel bored, it really doesn't matter. So I think relationships are more short-term. It's different. The other thing I'd like to say is nobody is equal.
Yeah.
It's a controversial statement to say, but it is not an equal world. So as leaders, you have to be able to differentiate. Now this is the controverse of leadership. You have to be able to appreciate the uniqueness of every individual, highly differentiate your investments. You need to know what makes that individual tick. It has to be personally connecting. The broad-based template simply just doesn't work. A simple example, about 4 or 5 months ago, we were in a lift, and I was with 2 very new IBMers who joined, straight out of college. And we were trying to bring people back to the office. We're not there yet, but it was the early days of us opening up. And 2 young, lovely ladies, and they were lost. They were coming to the office for the first time. So I said, hey, strike a conversation. Say, why are you here? What brings you to the office? Is it because of your team? No. It's not because of my team. Do you need any help? Can I guide you somewhere? No, I don't need any help. Are you heading somewhere to another building? Yes, we are. Do you know the way? I don't know. Can I guide you? No, I don't need any help. Says, then how are you going to fight the place? No, I've got what 3 words? I mean, all of you would have known what 3 words. I'm actually meeting a friend of mine who's in another spot in another building. I know exactly where to go to. So that actually struck me, to say, hey, they don't need a whole bunch of tutoring. I'm here because of my friend, not because of my boss asked me to come, or not because of my team. Eventually, those days, it's because I had a reason and a friend who was here at work. So I think we have to understand the mindset of the generations that we're going to deal with. This is just the beginning. I'm actually beginning to think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what the workforce is going to look like is going to be very, very different from what we've seen today. And then, coming back to your other question, across IBM, we have the deep researchers, we have the developers, we have the services business, we have the BPO business, we have the sales group. So it's highly, I'm going to say, across the spectrum. People like to be in the company of intelligent people. They like diverse teams. They'd like to engage in life outside of work. So, I think common groups of interest really helps. You have to have the connect of these folks and give them a platform to connect. You don't need to give answers, they'll find their answers on their own. So I see this world of workforce being very, very different, even within the IT world, from what it used to be. We have to flow like water. As Bruce Lee said, you pour, as leaders, you pour water into the bottle, it becomes the bottle. You pour it into a cup, it becomes the teacup. You cannot be static. You have to adapt with the times. Because if you are static, you will break. Yeah, so let's pause there.
Fantastic point, fantastic. Suman, while we are touching, I think, more on the Gen Z, but now we have a millennials, which is a big group in the workforce. How you are seeing millennials, Gen Z, and XX generation? So how you see taking together in a team, making a very productive and a fantastic team to work and deliver?
Yeah, I sometimes think that this discussion is a little overhyped, because I was a millennial once, right? I was sitting there and I had pundits sitting here who would talk and I would be rolling my eyes there, what are they saying? Now, I was not as good a millennial as the millennials today, obviously, because we lived in a different context. So when I think of this whole discussion, so I run a GCC where I'm the dinosaur and there are 5 generations in the company. The first prerequisite for being a successful leader, it doesn't matter who you're dealing with, is, I was in Mexico in 2005, I was doing a stint abroad. There's one commencement speech which I'm sure all of you know very well, Steve Jobs, 2005 Stanford speech. There's another one by a gentleman called David Foster Wallace. He was a great writer. And he gave this speech in Kenyon College. If you don't know it, look it up, you'll really benefit. It's called This is Water. One important thing there is that he talks about arrogance. And why is that important? You see, when you become a leader or you become anything, you think you're the center of the universe. And that's your first recipe for failure. Because unless and until you can get out of that self-imprisonment of arrogance, you will not be able to discover the world. Why did I realize that was significant in the job that I took? Which for me, this was not a job I really wanted, because I'm a finance guy, I've done finance all my life. And this job came in, they said, well, better make a GCC, hire great talent, and we'll do this and that. I said, fine, I'll give it a try. I wasn't very convinced. When we started hiring, and as I went down the road and I got into meetings, I would find that meetings which are represented by different generations gave us the best ideas. And they were never conclusive, because nobody matched anybody else's thoughts, and that's what we needed. But for me as a leader, I had to be humble. I had to make sure that I gave everybody space, because one thing with the millennials and Gen Z is they're not afraid to speak up, which is great, but that can ruffle some of the dinosaurs in the room who are used to dealing with things in a particular way. Couple of learnings that I've had is that When we started working and we were told that, okay, this has to be done in a certain way, we didn't question. We may not have agreed, but we were quiet. The Gen Z today or millennials, they want to know why. So if you haven't explained the why, you can forget that thing being done with full soul and heart. They'll probably do it because they still want the salary check, but forget it being done with the excellence that it could be, and it could actually come out with a different outcome. I think that's vital. The other thing, and I have a fair amount of mentors now who are probably 3 decades younger than me, haven't made the mistakes that I have, is a digital mindset. I believe India can win and we can win only digitally. And the digital mindset that I see in the Gen Zs is, Gen Z is just incredible. So that's what we are now tapping into because it's giving us a lot of learning. On the flip side, what I think the Gen Z and the millennials need to watch out is, they are smart, cocky, brash, confident, but there's thin line being confident and sounding too entitled. And sometimes that's the thing that I hear coming up, that I see a lot of entitled folks. It may not be entitlement, it's just the way that they express themselves. So for me, I am very excited. I think we've managed generations even before. This will keep on changing. This will always be there's always a good and bad. And I don't think anybody is correct. But we have to find a middle path, and all that starts with trust and respect. You have to accept that you're coming in for a common goal and you have a common North Star in mind. If that works, I think it's a level playing field and everybody is free to come in and be themselves when they walk into any workplace.
Thank you. Fantastic point. I think this now become a custom in any of the discussion. We always talk about pandemic, right? So obviously we will go with that custom. When we talk about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, right? How you see what has changed, and not only in the leaders, but in the mindset of anybody, whether it's somebody working in a different organization or individually as well. Because leadership is not something you will get a tag with some nice designation, but how your mindset has changed post-pandemic. Suman, can we start with you?
I think the whole world has changed. We are still grappling with many things which we don't have answers to. If I look at it, workplaces have changed, the workforces have changed, and work itself has changed, right? There is this huge debate about remote work versus non-remote work. We have many colleagues who have not yet come back. We are not putting a top-down kind of a thing because we also realize that, look, you need to give time for this to play out. But one thing I can say, and I don't have an answer to it and maybe I'm wrong, is that how do you go a leader sitting at home? I don't think that's possible. It might be possible, I don't know. But unless and until you're there, you learn by osmosis, you see others as to how they work, how they lead, what kind of mistakes they make, what they shouldn't do. I don't think you can get there. But do you need to come 5 days to the office to get that? I don't think so, right? So we have to get to this healthy paradigm, and that depends on what company, what kind of role, and what kind of job you're doing, right? I think the other thing that changes is leadership itself. So I have some leaders who typically manage by walking around the hall, going and giving quick instructions, meeting people by the water cooler. They need to meet people to feel that work is getting done. I feel pity for them because we're in a complete different paradigm where they're being asked to be inclusive and they have half the team in the room and the other half sitting in their home somewhere. So how do you manage? I think that's a big change, and some leaders have to grapple with old tendencies they have. And to be honest, if I tell you that I'm perfect in that, I'm not. There are times when I determine that, maybe I need to see that person for some reason or the other, and I don't know how to make it happen without ruffling feathers necessarily. Finally, what I'll say is that the leader itself now needs to become a player coach. You have to become a first-class virtual leader, but also a player coach, because people want you to give more coaching. They don't want more telling. There's more or less a sort of a truth that no leader can know everything, and I think it's brought out a little more in a more stark manner when the millennials question, which can be sometimes very discomforting. So I think there's a lot of soul searching that leaders themselves have to do to be effective in the future world. But ultimately, this all gets easy if you have that bond and trust that the other person feels that you actually care. Because once that feeling is there, my sense is you can surmount any mountain.
Fantastic point. Ravi, your thoughts? Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, we all talk about it, but what has evolved and changed?
All right. So pre-pandemic, all of us know, right? Come to office, get the job done, right? I think my view is that there is a huge paradigm shift in the way we approach the problems, we approach the business, we approach the work. Huge difference. And also it became, many cases, especially in the technology world, especially in IT sector, things became a lot more easier. I think, we were under unfair advantage because work can be done remotely. Many of the industries are not like that, right? And yes, we went through a huge turmoil for about, 18-24 months. But at the same time, the rate and the speed at which we moved to remote working is unprecedented. I know of several of my clients, they would not allow even a single hour of work to be done remotely, right? They said, no, we need a dedicated, environment, it has to be this secure and all of that, right? But we accomplished all of that, still moved into remote working in a matter of weeks, right? Almost all of us have gotten to that, right? That was possible because one of the fundamental thing was that we never thought that it was possible. The moment you were forced, the clients and the organization started thinking, yeah, it is possible. Start thinking about instead of saying that why it cannot be done, how can we get it done? They just changed the question, give you all the answers. The reason why it became even more easier is because of our millennials and Gen Z. Okay, let's not discount that. That is a fundamental reason, right? They are so natural when it comes to remote working. It's all based on the technology. It became so much more easier for them. And that is the reason why, things moved very quickly. As Suman mentioned, there are some pitfalls, no doubt about it, especially when it comes to, innovation, collaboration, some of those things, right now they've taken a back seat. We have to come back to that, in a very short order. Some of the companies have already started moving to hybrid. I think hybrid is the answer, at least, to in my knowledge. It's not 100% coming back to offices. I don't think that's the answer. A lot of our people, we know that now they move to their hometowns, their villages, expecting them to come back to office. I think, it's not fair, number one, and second thing is not practical. So we got to find a common ground to move into the hybrid model. It works for everybody. All of us also agree, I'm sure, is that our productivity went through the roof, right? Initially when we moved to remote working, now it's kind of stabilized, but still we are much better than when we were working from office. I think overall, what has happened, the outcome, despite all the trauma that created for a lot of the people, outcome, I think we are moving in the right direction. It's a technological evolution has been beautiful. And leaders have also adapted to this whole thing. Okay, I don't think, if you look at it, I don't think, we find it strange that now everybody is working remotely. It's happening very naturally. That goes to Darwin's theory.
Absolutely.
Right? Adaptability. All of us are, beings who are, very good at adapting to new environment. So
absolutely. And while you and Suman were talking about, three words comes to my mind is adapt, adopt, or evolve, right? So how, Thiru, you see adapt, adopt, evolve is working for IBM, and also from the innovation standpoint, how it's working in the current pre- and post-pandemic situation?
So, Bhaskar, I'll be honest with you. I think pre-pandemic, everybody played their part. During the pandemic, it was it was very unique environment. So post-pandemic, huge shift. So let me put it this way. I think during the pandemic, every CEO became the CHRO. Every manager became an HR person. Every HR leader became the CEO because the kind of decisions that one makes was all about people. So I think what the last 2 years has only amplified is your business is around people. Of course, I mean, you'll have products, you have technology and everything else, but without investing in your people, you don't have a business. So employee care, well-being, all those things which were part of the 100 things that one might be aware of became mainstream. So if I have to pick out, one or two very different things post-pandemic, it's really important for businesses that want to sustain and progress and grow to take care of the softer aspects of well-being and on people, which is now as important as other things that leaders would take time out to do. So that's one thing that I'd like to say. From an IBM point of view, we've always been flexible. In fact, 20 years ago, if we conduct an interview, the first thing that the candidate will say is, can I work from home? Because we were known for, being flexible and working from home. They won't ask for money. They'll say, can I work from home? And we'll say, yes, 20 years ago. So for us, it was a pretty easy transition. But I'd like to echo, my colleagues here. No one's going to be able to grow their career sitting in a bedroom in their pajamas. That's not the world today. The person next to you is better than you, is more curious than you, wants to learn 100 things more, faster. And at the end of the day, every company becomes a commercial enterprise. So there will be objectives that you got to meet. You'll have to work with teams. You cannot do it alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's detrimental for the individual now. So I think now well-being in a way is getting people back from home to the office. To have a friend at work. I see a lot of smiles in the audience because they may not agree or they agree. But it's a careful balance of hybrid. We've also continued to say, you pick the days. Don't come alone to work. Don't even come if you're coming alone to work. Come with your team. Come and meet friends, network. And there has to be a purpose and a reason to come back to the office. That's the position. The other thing I'd love to say is pre and post pandemic, communication is so critical. You have to communicate more because people are everywhere. They're not sitting next to you. So this personal style of leadership of meeting people is gone away. And therefore everybody needs to have that open communication style. Authenticity. You have to be original. No more face. People can see through it in a millisecond. Okay to be vulnerable. You don't have to know the answer. Say, I don't know, but I'll come back to you. So I think those are the traits that I think managers, first-line managers and leaders have had to inculcate from the pre-pandemic era to the post-era. Yeah. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And people are one of the biggest assets of our industry. That's the only asset. But as I promised all of you, I'm going to be your voice. I will put my fellow panelists in a little bit of problem now. So we'll go with a rapid fire round. And the rule of the game is, I will give you one word and you have to answer me in one word. So Ravi, I will start with you. We all hear from our managers, leaders. So let's hear from Ravi what his one word for that. Proactiveness.
Here? Can you repeat that question, please?
Proactiveness.
Yeah. Oh, you want to know what?
I want your answer in one word.
For the proactiveness, you want me to give you a different word, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's the rule of the game.
Oh, okay. All right. Proactiveness, innovation.
Superb. I will not give you this one for sure, Ravi. Suman, Gen Z, fast. We need to be a little fast. It's a rapid fire round.
Agile.
Superb. Cloud.
AI.
Okay. Mobile phone.
Social media.
Superb. Suman, innovation.
Craziness.
Okay. Sustainability.
Future.
Superb. Last but not the least, NASSCOM.
I think we just saw it this morning. Technological innovation.
Superb. Suman,
Glue.
you, Thiru?
Skilling.
Fantastic. I think our time is up, but all our fellow panelists, they are here. You can have a question from them. Thank you very much for joining. I hope we had some nice key takeaways from this panel discussion. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ravi, Suman, and Thiru. Thank you very much.
Check.